Your soulmate has a big secret, and it's about you. Listen now. It doesn't arrive like a confession or a sudden message. It shows up as a quiet shift in the way things feel, the kind you notice only if you slow down enough to sense your own breath. Maybe you've felt it already, that subtle pull in your chest, not heavy, not urgent, just present. Almost like something has been circling you, waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. This isn't about drama. This is about truth approaching gently, because it knows you're finally strong enough to hold it. There are secrets that exist because someone is hiding something, and then there are secrets that exist because someone doesn't yet know how to speak what they feel without changing everything. This is the second kind. Your soulmate isn't carrying this quietly out of manipulation or fear of consequences. They're carrying it because once it's spoken, nothing can go back to how it was. And they've been weighing that reality more seriously than you realize. You might think a secret is something whispered behind closed doors, but this one lives in behavior, in pauses, in moments where they almost say something and then choose silence instead. It lives in how their attention returns to you even when they try to direct it elsewhere. In how certain conversations linger longer in their mind than they should. In how your presence, even indirectly, has become something they can't fully compartmentalize anymore. What makes this different from the past is that you're not chasing clarity anymore. Earlier versions of you might have tried to decode signs, replay interactions, or search for meaning in every small gesture. You're not doing that now. You've learned the cost of overreaching emotionally. You've learned that clarity forced too early often arrives distorted. Now, you're simply aware. And awareness changes everything. There's a reason this secret is about you and not just about them. You represent something they didn't plan for. Not because of timing, but because of depth. You reflect back a version of themselves that feels more honest than the one they've been presenting to the world. And that kind of reflection is unsettling before it becomes liberating. They've tried to talk themselves out of it. Told themselves that feelings don't always mean direction. That connection doesn't always require action. That silence is sometimes the most responsible choice. Those explanations worked for a while, until they didn't. Because explanations can soothe the mind, but they don't quiet the body. And their body knows the truth before their thoughts can keep up. You may have noticed that your own energy has shifted too. Not in a restless way, but in a grounded one. You're less reactive. Less tempted to fill gaps with assumptions. That's not indifference. That's maturity. You've reached a point where you don't need immediate answers to feel secure in yourself. And that inner stability is precisely what's making this moment possible. Your soulmate senses that change in you, even if they can't articulate it. They feel that you're no longer grasping, no longer leaning forward emotionally in the way you once might have. That steadiness creates space. And in that space, truth has room to surface. This secret isn't a single sentence. It's a realization that unfolded slowly, across time, across choices they made that didn't bring the peace they expected. It surfaced in moments when they compared how they felt around others versus how they felt when your name crossed their mind. It showed up when distractions failed to fully distract. When comfort didn't equal fulfillment. They're not hiding this because they don't care. They're hiding it because they care enough to understand it before speaking it. Because once it's spoken, it demands integrity. And integrity asks more of a person than silence ever does. You're not meant to do anything with this information yet. This moment isn't about action. It's about alignment. About recognizing that something real has been forming beneath the surface without needing to be forced or rushed. You don't need to reach out. You don't need to test the connection. You don't need to protect yourself by withdrawing either. Just notice how calm you feel reading this. That calm isn't accidental. It's the result of growth that happened quietly, through experiences that taught you the difference between intensity and truth. You've learned that what's real doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits until both people are ready to hear it without fear. Your soulmate is closer to that readiness than they've ever been. The secret they carry isn't about confusion. It's about clarity they're still learning how to hold. Clarity that doesn't come with fireworks, but with responsibility. Responsibility to live in alignment with what they feel instead of continuing to manage appearances. And you, whether you realize it or not, are no longer someone who would be undone by that truth. You've done the work of becoming emotionally self-contained. Not closed. Contained. Strong enough to listen without losing yourself. This is why this moment feels different from other times you've sensed something building. There's no anxiety attached to it. No pressure. Just a quiet knowing that something meaningful is nearing the surface, and that whatever form it takes, you will be able to meet it as you are now. That's the real shift. You're not waiting to be chosen. You're not hoping to be validated. You're standing in your own center, aware that connection should add to your life, not destabilize it. That awareness changes the dynamic entirely. Your soulmate feels that too. They feel that if they speak this secret, it won't be received by someone fragile or reactive. It will be received by someone grounded. Someone capable of hearing truth without turning it into chaos. And that makes the secret heavier, but also safer. There's no rush here. No countdown. No dramatic reveal waiting just around the corner. This story is unfolding the way real things do, slowly, deliberately, with respect for the weight of what's involved. When this secret finally finds its voice, it won't sound like a confession. It will sound like honesty. Until then, let yourself stay present. Let yourself notice how steady you feel. Let yourself trust that whatever is forming is doing so because the conditions are finally right, not because someone is forcing it into existence. You're not being tested in this moment. You're being met. And that, more than any secret, is what matters most right now. It starts with a feeling you can't quite place, not excitement and not worry, just a quiet sense that something has shifted behind the scenes. Almost like walking into a room where a conversation has just paused, and even though no one says a word, you know something important was being discussed. That's the energy surrounding you now. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakably intentional. There are moments in life when truth doesn't rush forward. It waits until the noise settles, until defenses soften, until the people involved are steady enough to hear it without turning it into fear. This is one of those moments. What's been forming around you isn't sudden. It's the result of many small realizations stacking up quietly over time, until silence can no longer hold them back. Your soulmate didn't wake up one day with a secret fully formed. It grew slowly, through contrasts. Through noticing how different life feels when you're part of their emotional landscape, even indirectly. Through recognizing that certain thoughts return no matter how busy they make themselves. Through the uncomfortable awareness that some connections don't fade just because they're inconvenient. They've tried to be reasonable about it. Tried to label what they feel as nostalgia, curiosity, coincidence. They've told themselves stories that sounded logical enough to keep moving forward without disruption. And for a while, those stories worked. But logic can only carry a person so far when the body keeps responding to the same emotional truth. You might not know this, but the body doesn't lie. It reacts before the mind finishes explaining. That's why this secret became impossible to ignore. It showed up in restlessness during moments that were supposed to feel settled. In pauses during conversations that should have been simple. In a sense of absence even when life looked full. What's important here is that this isn't happening because something is missing in their world. It's happening because something specific exists in it. And that specificity has a name. Yours. You're not the solution to a problem. You're the mirror that revealed one. The mirror that reflected a version of themselves that felt more honest than the one they'd been living as. And mirrors don't force change. They simply show what's already there. What makes this moment different from others you've lived through is how you're showing up to it. You're not scanning your emotions for signs of danger. You're not bracing for impact or building expectations. You're present. Calm. Available without being exposed. That balance didn't come naturally to you once. You earned it through experience. Earlier, silence felt like rejection. Waiting felt like loss. Uncertainty felt personal. Now, silence feels neutral. Waiting feels spacious. Uncertainty feels tolerable. That shift didn't happen because you stopped caring. It happened because you learned how to care without abandoning yourself. Your soulmate senses that, even if they don't consciously understand it. They feel that you're not leaning toward them emotionally, not pulling, not demanding clarity. That lack of pressure creates a strange safety. And in safety, people stop pretending. This secret exists because they reached a point where pretending became heavier than honesty. Not heavier emotionally, but heavier morally. It started to feel wrong to continue living as if this awareness didn't exist. And when something feels wrong internally, it eventually demands to be addressed. That demand doesn't always come as urgency. Sometimes it comes as fatigue. A tiredness of carrying an unspoken truth. A tiredness of editing oneself. A tiredness of compartmentalizing feelings just to keep life tidy. They're there now. You may notice that your own thoughts about them feel clearer, less tangled. You're not idealizing. You're not minimizing. You're seeing things as they are, without needing them to be something else. That clarity doesn't close your heart. It steadies it. Steadiness is what allows truth to land without destruction. This secret isn't something that will explode when revealed. It will land quietly, like something that finally has permission to exist in the open. And when it does, it won't demand a reaction from you. It will invite a response. There's a difference. Reactions come from old wounds. Responses come from present awareness. You're capable of responding now. You weren't always, but you are now. That's why this timing matters more than the secret itself. You're no longer defining yourself through someone else's clarity. You're not waiting to be validated or chosen to feel whole. You've already done the work of becoming whole on your own. That wholeness doesn't make connection less meaningful. It makes it healthier. Your soulmate feels that shift as well. They sense that if they speak honestly, they won't be met with emotional chaos or expectation. They'll be met with presence. And presence is disarming in the best way. This isn't about destiny forcing two people together. It's about two people independently becoming honest enough to recognize what already exists. God's role in moments like this isn't to orchestrate outcomes. It's to create conditions where truth can surface without fear. Fear used to dominate moments like this in your life. Fear of loss. Fear of rejection. Fear of being misunderstood. That fear doesn't have the same hold on you now. You've learned that misunderstanding doesn't define you, and rejection doesn't erase your worth. That learning is why you feel steady instead of anxious. Your soulmate is standing at the edge of a decision that isn't about action yet. It's about ownership. Ownership of what they feel, regardless of what they choose to do with it. Ownership is the hardest part. Once someone owns their truth, the rest follows naturally. You don't need to prepare yourself for anything dramatic. This story isn't built on shock value. It's built on accumulation. On small realizations becoming undeniable. On quiet honesty replacing internal negotiation. As this unfolds, you may notice that you're less concerned with outcomes and more attuned to alignment. You're not asking whether this will lead somewhere specific. You're asking whether it feels real. Whether it respects who you are now. Whether it honors the growth you've done. Those questions protect you. Earlier, you might have compromised your own pace to keep connection alive. You might have rushed yourself emotionally to meet someone else where they were. You don't do that anymore. You allow others to meet you where you stand. That shift changes everything. This secret matters because it reflects something true, not because it guarantees anything. Truth doesn't promise outcomes. It promises clarity. And clarity, even when challenging, is kinder than prolonged uncertainty. You can feel that kindness in how calm your body feels right now. In how your thoughts don't spiral. In how you're able to read this without feeling pulled apart emotionally. That's not distance. That's strength. Whatever comes next will come into a space that's stable, grounded, and honest. There's no rush to define it. No need to label it prematurely. Real things don't need to be rushed into meaning. They reveal their meaning over time. Your soulmate's secret isn't a burden you'll be asked to carry. It's a truth they're learning how to carry themselves. And when they do, it won't be placed on you as weight. It will be offered as honesty. You're ready to receive honesty now, not because it guarantees comfort, but because you trust yourself enough to handle reality. That trust is the quiet foundation of this entire moment. You're not standing at the beginning of something fragile. You're standing at a point of clarity that didn't exist before. And whatever unfolds from here will be shaped by that clarity, not by fear, fantasy, or urgency. Let this continue to unfold without forcing it into shape. Let the quiet do its work. Let truth arrive when it's ready to be spoken, not when impatience demands it. You're not being left in the dark. You're being allowed to stand in your own light. And that changes how everything feels from here on. It surfaces as a gentle tension you don't try to resolve, almost like a question lingering in the background that no longer needs an immediate answer. You may notice it when your mind goes quiet on its own, when you're not searching for meaning but it still finds you. That's when you realize something is no longer forming, it has already formed, and now it's simply waiting to be acknowledged. What's happening now isn't build-up. It's emergence. There's a moment in every real connection where avoidance runs out of room. Not because anyone forces honesty, but because continuing to ignore it becomes more exhausting than facing it. That's the stage your soulmate has entered. The secret they carry didn't appear suddenly, it crystallized through repetition. Through noticing how certain thoughts returned even when they tried to redirect their focus. Through recognizing that some feelings don't fade with time, they deepen with understanding. They didn't want this secret to exist. Not because it's wrong, but because it's disruptive. It challenges the structure of the life they've been maintaining. It asks questions they weren't prepared to answer earlier. But readiness has a way of arriving quietly, without permission. You might feel that readiness in yourself too, though it shows up differently. You're not anticipating a reveal. You're not emotionally rehearsing conversations. You're not preparing yourself for disappointment or celebration. Instead, you feel anchored. That anchoring is new, and it didn't come from certainty. It came from self-respect. Self-respect changes how you wait. Earlier in your life, waiting felt like suspension. Like your life was on hold until someone else decided something. That's not how this waiting feels. Your life isn't paused. You're moving, living, breathing fully, while something important aligns alongside you instead of above you. That shift is everything. Your soulmate senses this difference, even if they can't name it. They feel that you're no longer emotionally hovering. You're not filling the space with expectations or silent demands. That absence of pressure is unsettling at first, and then relieving. Because pressure keeps people performing. Safety allows people to be honest. Honesty is what this moment is preparing for. The secret itself isn't dramatic. It isn't a shocking revelation designed to change everything overnight. It's an acknowledgement. An internal admission that the connection they share with you carries weight they can no longer pretend doesn't exist. Weight that didn't come from fantasy, but from consistency. Consistency is what exposes truth. They noticed how you remained present in their thoughts even when circumstances changed. How your influence didn't depend on proximity or frequency. How the idea of you wasn't replaceable by convenience or novelty. Those observations didn't alarm them at first. They accumulated slowly, until denial became illogical. You might wonder why this took time. Why awareness didn't turn into immediate action. But awareness without stability leads to chaos. Stability had to come first. And stability takes time to build when emotions are involved. You're no stranger to that process. You've spent time learning how to stay grounded without shutting down. How to keep your heart open without losing your sense of self. That learning wasn't glamorous. It happened in moments of restraint. In moments where you chose not to chase clarity. In moments where you let silence exist without interpreting it as failure. Those choices changed you. Now, silence doesn't feel threatening. It feels neutral. Sometimes even spacious. That's because you're not using silence to measure your worth anymore. You're using it to listen inwardly. Listening inwardly reveals alignment. Your soulmate is doing that now too. They're listening to themselves without immediately trying to solve what they hear. They're allowing feelings to exist without labeling them as problems. That allowance is what turns confusion into clarity. Clarity doesn't rush. It settles. This stage of the story isn't about movement. It's about ownership. Ownership of truth without rushing to assign consequences. Ownership without dramatizing. Ownership without expecting resolution to arrive immediately. You're capable of holding space for that now. Earlier, you might have felt compelled to act when something felt unresolved. You believed action equaled strength. Now, you understand that restraint can be just as strong. Sometimes stronger. Restraint keeps things honest. Your soulmate feels that restraint coming from you, even indirectly. They sense that you're not trying to pull them toward a conclusion. That you're not manipulating timing or emotional leverage. That absence of force removes fear. Fear once shaped many of their choices. Fear of disruption. Fear of regret. Fear of hurting others or being hurt. Fear doesn't have the same power it used to. What's replacing it isn't courage in the dramatic sense. It's acceptance. Acceptance of what they feel. Acceptance of responsibility for those feelings. Acceptance that ignoring truth doesn't make it disappear. Acceptance is quieter than bravery, but more effective. You may notice that your intuition feels clearer now, but less loud. It's not pulling you toward predictions. It's anchoring you in the present. That anchoring allows you to observe instead of react. Observation creates space. In that space, you're not asking what this will become. You're asking whether it's real. Whether it aligns with who you are now. Whether it respects the growth you've done. Those questions don't rush answers. They filter outcomes. This secret matters because it's rooted in reality, not imagination. It wasn't born from longing alone. It was born from lived experience. From interactions that left a mark. From emotional resonance that didn't fade when circumstances shifted. Real things don't disappear quietly. They persist. Your soulmate is coming to terms with that persistence. With the fact that this connection doesn't fit neatly into the life they designed without accounting for it. That mismatch demands attention. Attention isn't action yet. But it's the final step before it. You don't need to prepare yourself for what happens next. You're not standing on unstable ground. You're standing in self-awareness. That awareness won't be undone by someone else's truth. You've already integrated enough of your own. This moment doesn't ask you to be hopeful or guarded. It asks you to be present. Presence allows you to receive clarity without turning it into identity. You are not defined by this outcome. Whatever comes next will enter a space that's already grounded. A space where honesty is welcomed, but not needed to complete you. That's the difference between dependency and connection. You've crossed that line. God's presence in this unfolding isn't loud or directive. It feels like quiet permission. Permission for things to unfold without force. Permission for truth to surface when both people are capable of handling it. Capability matters more than timing. You're capable now. Capable of hearing without collapsing. Capable of responding without overextending. Capable of walking forward without dragging the past with you. That capability didn't come from this moment. It prepared you for it. As this story continues to move, it does so without urgency. Not because it lacks importance, but because importance doesn't need speed. It needs integrity. Integrity takes its time. You might feel moments of calm confidence surfacing unexpectedly. Not arrogance. Confidence rooted in self-knowledge. The kind that doesn't depend on being chosen or understood. That confidence stays with you. This secret, when it's finally spoken or acted upon, won't disrupt your center. It will meet you where you already stand. And because you're standing firmly in yourself, you won't need to reshape who you are to accommodate it. That's the quiet power of this stage. Not anticipation. Not fear. Not fantasy. Just truth approaching a place that's ready to receive it. And readiness like this doesn't come often. You earned it. It feels like standing at the edge of something that has already decided to exist, whether anyone names it or not. Not anticipation, not anxiety, just a steady awareness that a line has been crossed internally. You may notice this as a quiet certainty that doesn't ask for proof. It doesn't explain itself. It simply settles in, the way truth does when it no longer needs permission. This stage isn't about discovery anymore. It's about acknowledgement. Your soulmate has reached a point where the secret they've been carrying no longer feels separate from who they are. It isn't an intrusive thought they can set aside or a passing emotion they can wait out. It has integrated itself into their sense of self. And when something becomes part of how a person understands themselves, silence stops feeling neutral. Silence starts to feel dishonest. They didn't arrive here suddenly. They arrived here through exhaustion. The exhaustion of maintaining a version of life that requires constant emotional editing. The exhaustion of pretending certain thoughts don't return. The exhaustion of explaining away something that continues to feel real no matter how often it's dismissed. You might recognize that exhaustion in yourself, even if your role in this story is different. You've known what it's like to hold back parts of yourself to keep things manageable. You've known what it's like to downplay feelings because honoring them felt too disruptive. That's why this moment doesn't confuse you. It resonates. Resonance doesn't shout. It hums quietly beneath awareness. What's changed now is that neither of you is trying to escape that resonance anymore. You're not chasing it, and they're not suppressing it. You're both allowing it to exist without immediately turning it into action or interpretation. That allowance creates clarity. Earlier in your life, clarity felt like something you had to reach for. Something you had to earn through effort, analysis, or emotional labor. Now, clarity feels like something that arrives when resistance ends. You stopped resisting uncertainty. They stopped resisting honesty. Resistance always delays truth. Release invites it. Your soulmate isn't afraid of what they feel anymore. They're afraid of what acknowledging it might require. Not because they lack courage, but because they understand consequences. They know that truth isn't just something you say. It's something you live. Living truth demands integrity. You're no longer intimidated by that idea. Integrity once felt like something that might cost you connection. Now, you understand that connection without integrity costs you yourself. That understanding reshaped your values quietly, without announcement. You're watching this unfold from a place of inner alignment, not longing. That distinction matters. Longing pulls. Alignment allows. And allowance changes the emotional climate entirely. Your soulmate feels that shift. They feel that you're not waiting to be filled by what they might say or do. You're not reaching out energetically, not leaning into the unknown. That absence of pull creates a strange calm for them. Calm is unfamiliar when someone is used to emotional tension. In that calm, they're forced to listen to themselves more clearly. Without external pressure, their internal voice becomes louder. And what it's saying now is consistent. Not dramatic. Not confused. Consistent. Consistency is the clearest signal of truth. This consistency didn't come from fantasy or idealization. It came from repeated emotional data points. From noticing how your presence affects their sense of authenticity. From realizing that certain parts of themselves only feel accessible when you're in their emotional orbit. That realization isn't flattering. It's grounding. It doesn't inflate ego. It humbles. Because it implies responsibility. Responsibility to stop living half-aligned. Responsibility to stop pretending that emotional truth can be indefinitely postponed. Postponement always has a cost. You're aware of this cost now too. You've paid it before. You know how heavy it feels to delay honesty with yourself. That's why you're not rushing this moment. You respect the weight of what's forming. Respect slows things down in a healthy way. You may notice that your emotional responses continue to feel measured. Not muted. Measured. You're not oscillating between hope and detachment. You're not assigning meaning prematurely. You're allowing meaning to emerge organically. That patience isn't passive. It's intentional. Your soulmate is learning patience too, but from the opposite direction. Patience not to avoid action, but to ensure that when action comes, it's aligned with who they actually are, not who they've been trying to be. Becoming honest is a process. You might sense moments where the connection feels closer without anything happening externally. That closeness doesn't come from communication. It comes from parallel internal alignment. When two people are standing in truth simultaneously, distance loses its relevance. Relevance shifts from proximity to integrity. You've grown comfortable with that shift. Earlier, Distance might have made you anxious. Now, it feels neutral. You understand that connection doesn't dissolve in silence if it's real. And if it does dissolve, it wasn't anchored in truth to begin with. That understanding gives you peace. God's presence in this stage isn't directive. It doesn't say, move, or wait. It simply holds space for truth to finish surfacing without interruption. It respects human agency enough not to interfere prematurely. Interference creates confusion. Space creates clarity. You're experiencing the benefits of that space now. You're not tangled in expectation. You're not rehearsing outcomes. You're not losing sleep over unknowns. That doesn't mean you're indifferent. It means you're grounded. Grounded people don't lose themselves in possibility. Your soulmate is slowly grounding too. They're recognizing that the secret they carry isn't a threat. It's information. Information about what feels authentic. Information about what no longer aligns. Information doesn't force decisions. It informs them. That's where they are now. Informed. Not panicked. Not rushed. Informed enough to stop pretending ignorance. You may feel an increased sense of emotional neutrality toward the idea of revelation. Not because you don't care, but because you trust yourself to respond wisely. That trust didn't come from certainty. It came from experience. Experience taught you that emotional survival doesn't depend on outcomes. It depends on self-respect. Self-respect is what you're standing in now. This stage of the story doesn't escalate. It stabilizes. It allows all moving parts to align before anything becomes visible. Visibility always follows alignment, never precedes it. You don't need to be alerted when that happens. You'll recognize it by how natural it feels. Nothing about this ending phase feels forced. That's how you know it's real. Real things don't demand urgency. They arrive when the ground is prepared. The ground is prepared now. You've prepared it by becoming someone who doesn't abandon themselves while waiting. They've prepared it by becoming someone who can no longer ignore their own truth. Those two preparations meet here. You're not standing at the edge of a revelation that will shake you. You're standing in a moment that will confirm what you already sense. Confirmation doesn't shock grounded people. It settles them. This isn't about what will be said. It's about what can no longer remain unspoken. And you are ready for that. Not because you need it, but because you can receive it without losing yourself. That readiness is the quiet resolution of this chapter. Everything else unfolds from there. It settles into your awareness like a slow sunrise, not something that startles you awake, but something you notice once the light is already there. You may not be thinking about answers or outcomes anymore. Instead, you feel a quiet steadiness, as if your inner world has stopped bracing for impact. That steadiness isn't accidental. It's the result of something reaching completion beneath the surface. This moment isn't asking you to look ahead. It's asking you to recognize where you already are. The secret your soulmate has been carrying no longer feels like a separate thing from their daily life. It's woven itself into how they think, how they pause, how they respond to ordinary moments. They're not wrestling with it anymore. Wrestling implies resistance. What's happening now is acceptance. And acceptance always changes what comes next. They've realized that ignoring truth doesn't make life easier, it only makes it heavier. Every time they tried to move forward as if nothing was happening, something inside them pulled back. Not dramatically. Just enough to be noticed. Over time, that pull became impossible to dismiss. You might recognize that kind of internal tension. You've lived through moments where you tried to convince yourself that something didn't matter as much as it clearly did. Where you minimized feelings to stay functional. Where you told yourself time would erase what was unresolved. You learned, slowly, that time doesn't erase truth. It clarifies it. That lesson lives in you now. That's why you're not restless. You're not scanning your emotions for signs. You're not trying to decode silence. You're standing in a kind of emotional balance that once felt out of reach. That balance doesn't make you distant. It makes you centered. Centered people don't cling. They don't chase. They don't disappear either. They remain present. Your soulmate feels that presence. Not as pressure, but as stability. It's unfamiliar in a way that's calming. They're used to emotional environments where expectations hover unspoken. Where someone wants reassurance even when they say they don't. With you, there's space. And in that space, honesty feels safer. Safety invites truth. This secret isn't waiting to be revealed because of fear. It's waiting because of respect. Respect for the weight of what it represents. Respect for the reality that once it's acknowledged, it will require alignment, not just expression. Alignment is more demanding than confession. Confession releases tension. Alignment changes behavior. And behavior reshapes lives. That's why your soulmate has been careful. Not hesitant, careful. There's a difference. You're able to sense that difference now because you're not projecting urgency onto the situation. Earlier in your life, uncertainty felt like something you had to solve. Now, uncertainty feels like something you can hold without losing yourself. That capacity changed you. It changed how you love. It changed how you wait. It changed how you listen. You no longer confuse intensity with depth. You've learned that depth often feels quiet, steady, and grounded. That's what this feels like. Your soulmate has been watching themselves change in response to this realization. They've noticed that their choices feel incomplete when this truth is ignored. That certain paths no longer feel fully accessible. Not because they're blocked, but because they're misaligned. Misalignment doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers discomfort. They've heard that whisper enough times now to understand it's not going away. And instead of fighting it, they've started listening. Listening doesn't mean acting immediately. It means allowing clarity to finish forming. Clarity isn't rushed. You might feel that same patience in yourself. A patience that isn't waiting for a reward. It's simply honoring your own pace. You're not measuring days or moments. You're measuring alignment. And alignment doesn't run on clocks. This stage of the story feels quieter because the work is almost done. Not externally, but internally. The internal decision has nearly reached coherence. Coherence is when thoughts, feelings, and values stop arguing with each other. When that happens, action becomes obvious. You're not anxious about that action because you trust yourself to respond appropriately. You know you won't overextend. You know you won't disappear. You know you won't twist yourself into something you're not to accommodate someone else's truth. That knowledge keeps you grounded. Earlier versions of you might have compromised your boundaries to preserve connection. You might have rushed your own clarity to meet someone else's timeline. You don't do that anymore. You let people arrive where you are, or not at all. That shift is felt. Your soulmate senses that you're no longer available for half-truths or emotional ambiguity. Not because you're demanding clarity, but because you embody it. That embodiment quietly raises the standard. Standards don't need to be spoken. They're felt. This secret matters because it's occurring in an environment that can hold it. An environment where truth won't be weaponized or romanticized. Where it can exist plainly, without being inflated or diminished. Plain truth is powerful. God's presence in this unfolding feels like quiet reinforcement rather than intervention. There's no push toward outcome. Just a steady allowance for honesty to complete itself. Allowance respects free will. It doesn't manipulate. Manipulation would cheapen what's real. You may notice that your emotional imagination isn't running wild anymore. You're not picturing scenarios or rehearsing conversations. That doesn't mean you don't care. It means you trust reality more than fantasy. Reality feels safer to you now. This secret isn't a test of your patience or faith. It's a reflection of timing aligning with readiness. Earlier, this truth would have destabilized you. Now, it won't. And that's not because you've hardened. It's because you've integrated. Integration is quiet strength. You've integrated lessons from disappointment. You've integrated boundaries learned through experience. You've integrated self-worth that doesn't depend on being chosen. Those integrations allow you to stand calmly here. Your soulmate is integrating too. Integrating the understanding that emotional truth doesn't disappear when ignored. Integrating the responsibility that comes with awareness. Integrating the realization that living half-aligned isn't sustainable. Sustainability requires honesty. This stage doesn't feel like waiting because you're not suspended anymore. You're living fully in your own life while something important aligns alongside you. That parallel movement is new. It feels healthy. Healthy connections don't stall lives. They coexist with them. You may feel a quiet confidence emerging. Not excitement. Confidence. Confidence that you won't be undone by what's spoken or left unsaid. Confidence that you can hold space for truth without collapsing into it. That confidence didn't come from certainty. It came from self-trust. Self-trust is what anchors this moment. Whatever is revealed next will land in a space that's prepared. Not prepared to react, but prepared to respond. Prepared to honor truth without sacrificing self-respect. That preparation is the real resolution here. You're no longer standing in anticipation. You're standing in readiness. Readiness doesn't hurry the moment. It welcomes it when it arrives. And when this secret finally steps out of silence, it won't feel like a disruption. It will feel like a natural continuation of something that's already been acknowledged internally. You'll recognize it not by how intense it feels, but by how little it shakes you. That's how you know you're ready. Not because everything is clear, but because you are. And from that place, whatever unfolds will meet you in alignment, not imbalance. That's the quiet power of where you stand now. The story doesn't need to push forward. It already has. They've accepted that this connection carries meaning that can't be diluted. That meaning didn't appear because something was lacking elsewhere. It appeared because something specific resonated here. Resonance isn't negotiable. It either exists or it doesn't. And it exists. You're not trying to interpret that resonance anymore. You're not assigning it roles or expectations. You're letting it be what it is. That neutrality isn't distance. It's clarity without attachment. Attachment once drove your responses. Clarity guides them now. You might notice how your body feels as you sit with this. There's no clenching. No bracing. Your breath moves easily. That physical ease matters. It's your nervous system recognizing safety in truth rather than threat. Safety doesn't mean comfort. It means stability. Your soulmate is learning the same lesson. They're realizing that avoiding discomfort doesn't create safety. It creates fragmentation. Living fragmented eventually becomes unbearable. Integration, even when uncomfortable, brings peace. Peace doesn't rush decisions. It prepares them. This stage of the story feels quiet because the internal work is almost complete. The arguments have ended. The justifications have dissolved. What remains is a simple understanding that can no longer be set aside. Simplicity is the final form of truth. You're no longer imagining scenarios or rehearsing reactions. That mental activity used to feel necessary. Now it feels unnecessary. You trust yourself to respond in real time, grounded in who you are rather than who you were afraid of being. Fear used to shape your imagination. Self-trust shapes it now. You may feel moments where your attention drifts back to your own life, your own rhythm, without guilt. That's important. It means you're not orbiting this connection. It's part of your world, not the center of it. Healthy connections don't replace your center. They meet you there. Your soulmate senses that independence. It removes pressure. It tells them that honesty won't be met with dependency or expectation. That knowledge makes truth easier to approach. Approach isn't announcement. It's readiness. You're both standing in readiness now, even if from different angles. You're ready to hear without absorbing. They're ready to acknowledge without minimizing. That mutual readiness is rare. It can't be manufactured. It arrives when growth has done its work. Growth happened quietly here. You might reflect on how different this feels from earlier connections. There's no urgency to define. No impulse to label. No need to prove anything. Those impulses belong to a time when self-worth was still being negotiated internally. You've finished that negotiation. God's presence in this phase feels like a steady assurance that you don't need to rush toward meaning. Meaning will meet you when honesty becomes unavoidable. There's no punishment in waiting, and no reward for forcing. There's simply alignment. Alignment isn't dramatic. It's durable. You're noticing durability in yourself. Your emotions aren't swinging. Your sense of self isn't fluctuating. You're consistent across days. That consistency didn't come from closing off. It came from integration. Integration turned lessons into structure. Your soulmate is integrating too. Integrating the understanding that feelings can't be selectively acknowledged. Integrating the responsibility to live truthfully rather than conveniently. Integrating the awareness that silence has reached its limit. Limits clarify choices. You're not standing at the edge of a reveal that will overturn you. You're standing in a place where truth can arrive without causing collapse. That's the difference between readiness and longing. Longing waits for fulfillment. Readiness welcomes clarity. This moment doesn't ask you to be hopeful. It asks you to be honest with yourself about how far you've come. You're not the same person who once needed certainty to feel safe. You're not the same person who would have mistaken intensity for connection. You've learned to recognize depth by its steadiness. Steadiness is what you feel now. As this story continues to unfold, it does so without spectacle. That doesn't diminish its importance. It confirms it. Important things don't need to announce themselves. They settle into place. You may notice that you're less interested in how this looks and more interested in how it feels internally. That shift protects you. Appearances fluctuate. Inner alignment endures. Endurance is quiet strength. Your soulmate is approaching the same realization. They're understanding that living aligned matters more than preserving appearances. That understanding changes priorities. It doesn't rush action, but it removes avoidance. Avoidance has run its course. You don't need to do anything right now. Not because nothing matters, but because you're already where you need to be. You've created an inner environment where truth can be received without distortion. That environment is the real achievement. Whatever is acknowledged next will meet you as someone grounded, aware, and intact. It won't require you to bend, perform, or sacrifice your center. It will simply arrive into a space prepared by self-respect. Self-respect doesn't negotiate with fear. This phase doesn't conclude with an answer. It concludes with readiness. Readiness to listen. Readiness to respond. Readiness to continue living fully regardless of outcome. That readiness frees you. You're not waiting for life to begin after this moment. Life is already happening, and this moment is integrating into it rather than interrupting it. Integration is the quiet ending of uncertainty. You can feel that ending now, not as relief, but as stability. Stability that doesn't depend on what's said next. And from that stability, whatever comes will meet you in truth, not imbalance. That's where you stand. And that's enough.